And they thought that
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leader of the opposition and the leader of the Barbados Labour Party, the next Prime Minister, Mia Amor Mottley. Good night. Good night to each and every one of you. We stand in the shadow of Providence Church, because if ever this country needed the Providence, it is now. If ever we needed the ability to be stirred by the hand of God, it is now. And I ask you tonight to stay with me for the next hour, because this country stands at a perilous moment, and it seems as though July will come to be regarded always as a significant month in this country's development. July was the month when our forefathers had to stand for what was theirs, a country that they were not satisfied that they could be treated like slaves, even though emancipation had taken place more than 100 years ago. July last year, and you know I like my crop over, but we met in the Corinage, by the Corinage, near the place where the slaves of this country were offloaded, and I spoke to you then about the actions of a wicked government seeking to impose on you a level of taxation called a solid waste tax that was disproportionate. And I said to you then that even though it was the middle of crop over, our national festival, that I had as leader of the opposition and leader of the Barbados Labour Party to do my duty to the people of this country, and that I should walk, even if it was my one walking alone. Mercifully, many other people in this country felt like I did, and we mounted what is still one of the largest demonstrations in the last 25 years in this country to stand for what is right and to reflect the will of the people. I ask you to recognize that after many months of rubbing shoulders and people's assemblies and sensitizing people about what was wrong in this country, to recognize that we have now reached a moment in time where there is a recognition by the unions and by the private sector of this country and by the commentators in Barbados that what we face is a government moving in the wrong direction, that the people can no longer bear the actions and inaction the noise and silence of a government that is doing as it wants to, as if they are not part and parcel of the body politic of Barbados and to take care of the people of this country. Ralph told you tonight, and I thank him for a sterling speech. I thank the gentleman, the goodly gentleman, in front of whose house I spent the last 2 hours. So I heard the meeting too. But he spoke to you about the importance and symbolism of providence and care. And if there is one thing that measures this government, is its inability to care for the people of Barbados. We have come tonight against the background of a country that is in turmoil. A country where the industry that guided and fed thousands of families is on its knees. I speak of the sugar industry. And the largest landowner in this country is telling this country that if the government does not give it a response by the end of July, they will remove their lands from the sugar industry. But at the same time, the government wants to build a $500 million factory for a 10,000-ton industry. We have come tonight against the background of a tourism industry that, even in spite of an increase in numbers at winter, is now reeling under the hands of the sargassum weed. There are some hotels on this coast who are now spending almost $100,000 a month to either move people to other hotels or to bus people to beaches on a daily basis on the West Coast, because they cannot offer their guests what they promised them. And they do this against the background of a government that has been promising them since November 2013, the 6th of November to be precise, when they gave Sanders everything under the earth that they asked for. And a Minister of Finance can tell Barbadian hoteliers, wait your turn. You think it is instant coffee we dealing with? He didn't tell Butch about instant coffee. He let the taps run flowing. You didn't have to wait for instant coffee at Sandals. We meet against the background of a private sector association that has now found it necessary to write the Prime Minister of this country a letter calling for an urgent meeting along with Setu Saab, the body of all of the unions except the Workers' Union. And in that letter, the private sector says there is an ongoing challenge to receiving responses from government. So it is not only Frondel who is dumb and mute. It is all of them. For unless you are talking a certain language, they don't respond. And the private sector has called for a meeting to ask about the lack of transparency in this country. And that is a fancy word, for we do not know what the government is doing it and why it is doing it and what contracts they are issuing and under what terms. That is what they're asking for. And they say that there have been a number of matters placed in the public domain to which there have been no answers and for which they need clarity. I want to thank Kerry Simmons for addressing you tonight on one of those fundamental matters on which there is no clarity. And I refer to the horrendous plan to build a project plant, plasma gasification, that can in fact ruin this country, not only financially, not only economically, not only in terms of our environment, but in terms of the health of the people of this country, if you are to listen to Professor Connett, who the Future Center Trust brought into this country to comment on the plan. But we also meet tonight against the background of the Barbados Workers Union and the National Union of Public Workers, calling on all of their members to come to meetings tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock to begin to discuss what action they will take, because their government has remained arrogant and contemptuous of the cause of the workers in relation to the BIDC matter. Now I will come to that shortly, but I want you to also know the other reason that we meet at Providence and at Pilgrim Road tonight. Please bring me some water. We meet here a couple hundred meters from Coverley, a project that represents the worst of what this government has done in relation to giving people the opportunity to get all that the government has for nothing and to do what they have to do while not following the rules and the regulations and the laws of this country. And you know, friends, at Turalcott 2 weeks ago, I spoke to you about the tragic death of a young boy on what should have been the happiest day of his life. A young boy leaving his graduation, destined to Queen's College, having had celebrations with his friends and classmates, and on his way home met with a tragic accident that regrettably took his life. 48 hours from now, that young boy, Abijah, will be buried. And I speak with the consent and permission of his mother, because these are never easy times. And on behalf of the family and all of you here tonight, I know you would want me to extend our deepest sympathy and our prayers at this very difficult time for that family. But I said then that you cannot have people flouting the law and the rules and regulations of this country in circumstances where they were not given permission to build that island in the road. And the number of people who have come to me since who have said, you know how many times I almost hit that thing in the road? You know how many times? But on the 1st of July, and I ask you tonight, who really is running this country? Because we have a prime minister who is so contemptuous of the people that he sugarcoats incompetence with silence. He pretends to be silent when in truth and in fact, he really doesn't know any better. The driver cannot drive. He doesn't know what to do. So he tells you that he is a deep strategic thinker, quoting all of these historical things, but the man can't know how to move the car from here to that corner. And when you have a vacuum, people will fill it. People will fill it. So that persons in Barbados believe that it is okay, a handful of them, to do as they want and do as they will, and the rest of you have to follow the laws of this land. Well, on the 1st of July, the nation carried a headline, "Not So Mia." A statement by one Mark Maloney, the gentleman responsible for that development, and many, many others. Many, 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 many others. And he gave the country the impression that I misled or lied to the country at Terrell Court. But I want you to know now, as you already know, Mia Mottley does not speak without documents. I don't speak without the facts. And the reality is that he knows, and I know, that on the 24th of March 2012, an enforcement notice was issued on behalf of the Chief Town Planner, signed by one G. Brown. And that enforcement notice asked them to remove or to note that there was an erection on land belonging to the Crown, not to Housing Concepts, not to Pregonco, not to Mr. Maloney, but to the Crown of Barbados, situated at Coverley, adjoining lands of the National Housing Corporation to the north, and the ABC Highway to the south, in this island of entrance walls and planter within the road shoulder and the road reserve of Barbados. So that you not only build without planning permission, but you build on land not belonging to you and belonging to the people of this country. Do you understand that that is just the beginning? When we spoke of Valerie being built without planning permission, the government winked at it, just confusing us with regulations. When we spoke about Bushy Park, the track being built without planning permission, we were told that you're trying to stop a major event, Top Gear. You remember that? From being held at Bushy Park. And that is a wicked opposition. Rules are made for a reason. And when you wink at the small transgressions, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And regrettably tonight, it got so big as to claim the life of a young, promising Barbadian. But you know what offends me more? The Chief Town Planner would have gotten information from the Chief Technical Officer, MTW, who made it clear that the government wants that land there to be able to widen the highway. Because you know and I know that it is not dual, there are no 4 lanes up there. But you see, it wasn't only Mia Mottley who was offended by it. Because when asked if after the young man has passed away, would you do anything now to move it? Mr. Maloney said it's not for him to move. It is for MTW. And he left the distinct impression that it was the MTW designers that was responsible for it. You read the article? I tell you a lie? Let me hear you now. Well, you know, people have a way of sending me things in my mailbox. And a memorandum was written on the 3rd of July, 2 days after that article, from a senior officer in the Ministry of Public Works to the Permanent Secretary. And I want to take the time to quote a few lines from it before I come to the other matters that I am here to speak to you about. The matter, she said, arose as a result of that same newspaper article called Not So Mia, where the impression was given that the Ministry of Public Works designed the island and the road. Listen to what the memo says. Look at the, and I quote, "Some of Mr. Maloney's comments are not accurate, and further, they cast aspersions on the professional integrity of the technical staff of this ministry." This article reports that he stated that the junction was actually designed by the Ministry of Transport and Works, and the developer just put the junction there, unquote. The ministry, however, does not provide design services to the private sector. Listen again. He is also reported as saying that there were many junctions identical to that in Barbados. And she quotes from him, "So there is nothing different about the one at Coverley," unquote. This is just another erroneous statement, as the dimensions of acceleration and deceleration lanes at Coverley are quite different. In fact, they are deficient. Those are not Mia Mottley's words. Those are the words of the professional staff at the Ministry of Public Works. And tonight, a young boy is no longer with us. He said, and she goes on about the bell, that the only other junction in Barbados with accelerator and decelerator lanes is the Bell Junction, where the situation is different. She then goes on, the person goes on to say that it was built, according to Mr. Maloney, in compliance with all regulatory requirements. The letter reads, "Once again, this statement is simply not true, as MTW's comments are on record with the Chief Town Planner." She then deals with the fact that Mr. Maloney says that he has no affiliation with Housing Concepts. You read that? The letter says that is strange because he has attended meetings at the Ministry of Public Works with officers on behalf of Housing Concepts. And I'm going to run. The letter refers to the fact of a meeting on the 18th of December 2011 where they waited for representatives to come from Housing Concepts. All of the MTW staff out there, and not a representative came to be told what they had to do and what they didn't have to do. And then here comes the big one. Last Saturday on the 4th of July, a gas station opened at Coverley. You know the gas station I mean? Do you know the gas station that I mean? Would you believe that even after this young boy died, even after they were called to account for breaches of town planning regulations, that a gas station that no less a person than the Minister of Planning, the Prime Minister of Barbados, said on the 16th of January, because when they applied first to put the gas station there, they were refused on the 3rd of August 2013. They appealed to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, let me stop, because they were refused because they said that a gasoline dispensing facility poses a risk to the residential area due to its proximity. They weren't refused for foo-foo reasons. They were refused because of the hydrocarbon releases from gasoline. They were refused because of the same access and egress facility onto the highway, the same entrance and exit that I spoke about at Terracotta and I just spoke about again. But the people appealed, as is their right under the law. And on the 16th of January this year, the Prime Minister said you can build the gas station, but there are a number of conditions. You can retain it, because they had already built it. You understand who run in this country? You got to get permission for everything you do. But there are a handful of people who believe that they can float the law in this country. And when we come to talk about what is being done to you as workers, then you begin to understand the dastardly nature of this government and how they simply do not care. But on the 16th of January, what were the major conditions that should concern you that were given? That no gas station was to be opened unless these things were done. I have the conditions here, but I also have the same memorandum to which I was referring, and I want to read to you what they said too. That at 106 is a letter from Defense and Security, the Prime Minister's office, dated the 16th of January 2015, with the application number 0947-062-013E. Retention of a gas station at the villages Coventry Christchurch. It has been addressed to Mark Maloney, Housing Concepts SRL. Clearly indicating that affiliation. The letter outlines the conditions for the retention of the gas station and speaks specifically to the redesign of the entrance and exit, they say egress. And here is the other one, the removal of 3 houses that are within 50 meters of the gas station. Now nobody is occupying those houses now. But would you believe that that gas station was open, and it is not the people running the gas station, because they didn't apply to the chief town planner. It is the developer. And it is the developer who has the obligation to comply with the obligations that the Prime Minister set in writing. Redesign that entrance and exit. 7 months ago, 7 months before the young boy passed, this company was told to redesign it. They then tried to put the notion of a roundabout 2 months later in March, and the people told them, you cannot appeal against the minister. The minister's decision is final. And what they should have done was to remove the houses and remove the entrance and then apply for anything else that they want to do. There are people building along this highway who have had to incur money to redesign their entrances onto the off the highway because town planning said you could not do it. And you know, when you check the reasons from town planning, in the interest of road safety, in the interest of public health, in the interest of the health of the citizens, do you think that a whole government paying a town planning department to sit down and write nonsense? Or are they trying to defend you, the people of this country? But you have, this is not a case of white shadows anymore, this is the real thing. A handful of people who believe, and this is nothing personal for me, I don't have any personal vendetta against them, but I have a duty when citizens of this country are being unfair to speak truth to power. And tonight, I shall do so, knowing full well that somebody has to stand up and say enough is enough. That if you don't stand for something, you will lose everything. And tonight, even after that young boy passes, they have the gall to come and tell you that they are going to build around the boat as they did on VOB on Thursday. But who is the government of Barbados? The minister didn't come to you. The prime minister didn't come to you. The chief technical officer didn't come to you. A developer that has been in breach for 3 years, and even since the appeal, 7 months. And you want to tell me that this country is not going to the dogs? Mark my word, it can't continue. But you think it stops there? Barbados has a historic railway track that runs from country to town. How many of you have ever heard of the all-way railway track? Do you know that they were and built? Dale is a land lawyer, he can tell you that when you go and build on somebody's land, it is an encroachment. He does a lot of other law too, but he does more land law than me. And the track is 2/3 of the way over the 6-meter railway track. And in spite of everybody saying you have to move it, it continues there. And who does he appeal to? The ministers. As if ministers are his minions and not your servants. But if that's what he and they want, send them a message for me. Send them a message for me. But I want to come on to tell Mark Maloney finally, if you have documents giving you permission, produce them. Because I got documents showing you don't have permission. And as I am on the topic of documents, let me reinforce the call from this platform tonight from Kerry Simmons that I asked in Parliament and at Tyrrell Court, and Kerry asked again tonight for 2 agreements for KL that the government has not produced to you or to me. Those agreements were signed in our name. And I thank Kerry for bringing to your attention the example of Bahamas, where a parliamentary secretary signed a letter of intent and was disciplined for signing in the people's name without the authority that is required under the Constitution of this country and other laws of this country. But more than a month has gone, and these agreements bind us. The government is not spending the $700 million. The government is committing to pay them $4.8 billion for the next 30 years, until 2048. And I don't know where in God's earth, with this economy as it is, any government of Barbados can find that money to commit to anybody for any waste energy plant. I said it is a waste of energy, and I repeat it tonight. And I want to send a message to the present investors and the future investors. Elections are due over just 30 months, 35 months to be exact. And if it is the will of the people of Barbados that the Barbados Labour Party is to constitute the government, those contracts will be put under the microscope. And if there is anything vaguely untoward about them in terms of public policy or fraud, they will be revoked. They will be revoked. First and foremost, for the environmental and health risks that it poses to the people of this country. We have one island, one rock. There's one of us. When you're dead, you can't come back. Not unless you're performing some kind of underworld and seance things. And therefore, There's a good Latin phrase called caveat emptor. And let my voice go across the universe tonight that the Barbados Labour Party puts on notice current investors and future investors in that project that we will not sell out the health or the well-being of Barbadians for any amount. And I ask you tonight to join with those voices who are calling on the Prime Minister to produce those documents as a matter of urgency. We don't even know the cost of breaking the contracts if we want to break them. Because you know that even if you go and rent this shop here and you breach the contract, you got to pay damages, not true? If you go and lease a car and you decide you don't want it no more and the contract say you got to pay 3 months or 6 months, you got to pay it, not true? And therefore, when ministers in the absence of cabinet sign a contract binding a country to pay $4.8 billion over 30 years, we must know now, and we will not rest. We will not rest until we see those contracts, because they were not signed in Dennis Lowe's name. They were not signed in Chris Sinclair's name. They were not signed in Darcy Boyce or Dennis Kelman's name. They were signed as ministers. Your servants. Your servants. And I gave the Prime Minister the chance to be able to deal with it. And he didn't. But then again, this is the same Prime Minister who refuses to deal with the industrial action before us. And let me deal with that. Because you know, when he told the country he does not inject himself, I really had to laugh and thought Trevor Eastman was wearing a mask, and the mask was from his shirt. Or he can be for real. He can be living boat here. And did you see how Ralph Gonzalez looked at him, Prime Minister St. Vincent, and laughed? Laugh! But our Prime Minister is now the laughing stock of the region. You have a strike that threatens to shut down this whole country, and you will talk about you in injecting yourself in the process? Well, he didn't want to inject himself, but Esteban tried to insert himself in the process. And she did that 24 hours later on the Monday. The night is now Sunday night. And the Prime Minister is like Winston Hall, you can't find him. We know where she is. And mercifully, she has been sent above and abroad to save the unions and the workers and the people of Barbados from her perfect record of failure, because she has not yet solved a single labor dispute in this country. So she may do better entertaining the friends of DLP in New York. But you have not seen or heard the Prime Minister since he has made these offensive and comic comments. And we now tonight don't know what is the government's position. And let me break it down simply for you, because I hear a lot of pretty talk about the IDC going to court for an interpretation. What nonsense is that? This is first and foremost a moral issue. Do you understand that this is workers not asking for, they ain't asking for a raise of pay, yet at least. They ain't asking for broken promises of duty-free cars and interest-free mortgages. They are asking for workers' security of tenure to be protected. And something happened this week in this country that causes me to shudder, because it rolls back 77 years of workers' rights in this country. That a letter could come from within a ministry asking the ministry to identify the names of all public officers, all officers who attended the protest action on March on July 6, 2015 is not only regressive, but you would have the likes of national heroes who fought for workers' rights in this country, like Frank Walcott, and Hugh Springer, and Grantley Adams, rolling in their graves, that they could believe that a modern government, almost 50 years after independence, could seek to intimidate workers by asking for their names, when all they are doing is to do that which the Constitution of Barbados guarantees them, the right to associate on behalf of the workers of this country. Well, I say that if this intimidation starts, you will see and feel the full weight of the Barbados Labour Party in this country. We are not going to tolerate it. This party was formed in the crucible of workers' rights. There are too many people who walk with Grantley Adams and all of the others to bring rights to your grandparents and great-grandparents and parents when they couldn't do anything to protect themselves in this country. They couldn't get vacation, they couldn't get the money protected from deductions. They fought for the Barbados Workers' Union to be formed. And even though the Barbados Workers' Union for some years moved on its own away, the Barbados Labour Party has never given up the protection of workers' rights in its 77 years, and will never do as long as I am the leader of this party. But you know, how easy is it to be resolved? That's what you need to be asking yourself. Because you're hearing all this fancy legal talking about going to court. Do you understand that all this requires is the Cabinet of Barbados to meet, and the Cabinet to tell the Minister of Industry that this government will not discriminate against people on the basis of age? And I have authority to speak on this matter, because I was the one who led the debate in 2004 that sought to harmonize the retirement age of people in statutory boards with the one in the private sector and under the National Insurance Scheme. And we said then that we needed to delay the age from 65 to 67, but we would do it over a period of time. The section that was left for the statutory board to send home an individual at 60 was never intended to send home a class of persons. And in this case, a class of persons across every department of the IDC, connected only by age. That is wrong, and that is discriminatory. And you don't need a court of law to tell you that. You just need, as a government, to do the right thing. But it is the same treatment meted out to the NCC workers last year, when they knew the Prime Minister said last in, first out, and no single breadwinner from a household should go home. And all the Prime Minister and the Cabinet had to do was to meet and to send down the policy directives to the statutory board that the law allows them to do. So I say to Fernandez Stewart tonight, stop hiding behind the courts and lead this country. Stop hiding behind the courts. And the nonsense and arrogance of a minister who could tell you, strike or no strike, he is going to his desk. And then next thing you know, we hear he gone to Colombia. When I hear about Millie going to Brazil, I never hear about Donnie going to Colombia. Donnie gone to Colombia, oh Lord, poor Donnie. With the workers hot up under his tail, and he gone and he's to go to Cuba here this week. Our workers cannot get matters resolved. But I want to tell you, this is not about the 13 at the IDC. Every worker at a statutory board in Barbados who is over the age of 55 now faces the prospect, and listen carefully, faces the prospect that if they want to go to get a car loan, 5 years, 7 years alike, that they know are going to be asked by the bank or the credit union, what is the security of tenure that I can rely on? Do you understand why the unions are fighting for this issue? This is not about 13 people. This is about hundreds of people who, if not yet at 55, may well be soon 55, because you will not get a loan from a bank if you cannot have the income to repay it. But you know, this government can't understand that, because they don't understand that workers live ordinary lives and live in the real world. Workers don't have developers building houses for them as a thank you. Workers don't have people giving them cars and BMWs for business. Real workers in Barbados plan out the life, know that they're going to retire at 65 or 66, and they plan out the business to suit. And the only thing that might change is if they win a Mega 6, and wicked Chris Sinclair even taxing that Mega 6 now. So when the unions stand and say, look, this issue is a fundamental issue for us. You cannot discriminate against people on the basis of age. And when I led the legislation in Parliament in 2004, the Pensions Miscellaneous Provisions Act, it was to give the country the assurance that workers in Barbados at statutory boards would now retire at the later ages that we provided for with the NIS reform that was undertaken by the Barbados Labour Party. And you have a government now trying to enforce a program, keeping up under itself, not giving you the program in one place. Chris Sinclair telling you, oh, there will be rationalization. What does rationalization mean? That people can get sent home from a number of agencies. And I want to alert the customs officers who legitimately have concerns about going to the Barbados Revenue Agency that you will now become subject to that same legislation that will cause you to go home at 60 and will cause banks and credit unions not to give you any money at 55. The people at the gymnasium, the people at the Sports Council, National Housing, call them off. So when you stand up in this country to defend the rights of workers, for this section, when it is so easy for the government to call, the Prime Minister can call the Cabinet Secretary tomorrow morning. You understand this? And tell the Cabinet Secretary, I would like a meeting of Cabinet at 2 o'clock. And by 3 o'clock, the Minister of Industry, if he is back from Colombia or Cuba, can tell his PS to inform the board of the IDC that it is not the policy of this government to discriminate and to send home a whole class of people willfully and wrongfully and arbitrarily under the law because they have reached the age of 60. It is wicked. And if there's anybody who deserves sending home because they passed the age of 60, who is it? I can't hear you. And that was what that section was for the one-off case, for the individual case. And the only body that deserves that is the person who you just called, who? Frondell Stewart, for his utter and complete incompetence. But I want to, sometimes you gotta do a thing a little light. I went on my phone last night and Googled the name Frondell. I wanted to see who else in the world called Frondell. But the truth is I ain't know nobody else named Frondell. And one other name came up. It wasn't a first name. It was a last name. And you check it yourself there now if you're born. The name was a Reverend Barry Frondell. A Rabbi Barry Frondell. And the only thing that could be said about Rabbi Barry Frondell was that Rabbi Barry Frondell was convicted and sentenced to 6.5 years for peeping. For peeping. Now I don't know what is the coincidence, but I know that this government is peeping around the corner and trying to put lashes on you because the government does not have money and is trying to impose an IMF program without going to the IMF and causing you, the workers, to be the victims of it. So you peep round the corner and you say send home them 13 from IDC. And then you peep round the corner and you say send home a few who reached 60 from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And you peep round the corner and you're going to say the same thing at BRA or the Sports Council. Before the people come to you and talk to you like men and women, they're peeping around the corner. Well, I want you to know tonight, ladies and gentlemen, that the Barbados Labour Party will not be intimidated. And I sense that those workers and unions have reached the end of their tether, and that this is the straw that broke the camel's back. So that when you hear the unions saying that they will not put up with this, understand that this is not a one-off incident. This comes after hundreds of people were sent home at the NCC and all across Barbados. And I say to you tonight, do not be intimidated by them. You see that letter that went out about the list of people? Tell them they cannot trouble you. Because if they trouble you, you are now asking us to bring things in this country to a different level, and the Barbados Labour Party will not stand by and see the public officers of this country intimidated. I ask the public officers, do not be intimidated. Also on Cahill, there's a lot of running around now to deal with a land acquisition for the 27 acres. I am told it may well be by private treaty, so it does not have to come to Parliament. But that they're rushing, because if the government does not pay the money, there may be penalties in the millions of dollars. We do not know, because Frondel will not release the contracts, so we can judge him and then. And I want you to know, in the unions and the private sector, this government's modus operandi is to accuse people of being partisan. Oh, don't mind them is a B. Oh, don't mind them like the Labour Party. Well, let me tell them something. There are people in this country who like the Labour Party. And there were only 300 votes that stopped us from being the government at the last election. So understand that we have a moral obligation to speak and to lead. And for those who say that we are interfering, you can't interfere in what is your duty. You can't interfere in what is your responsibility. So understand that we will support any noble cause in this country, as I told you at Terrell Court. And I want you to know this now, that what is required is not just to sit back and change the government, because many of you have made up your minds that come 2018, you're done with them. The problem is, it is not 2018 you have to worry about. It is 2015, 2016, and 2017, because if you keep quiet, there will be nothing left to protect. There will be nothing left of this country that you know and love. And unless people stand up and be counted, unless people, not just the Labour Party, unless other groups and other individuals register their disapproval for the way in which this government is acting in your name, they know they're gone, you know. And they're not even interested in pensions anymore. They are interested in doing what they can do along the way to get what they can get along the way. That is your word, not mine. But I say to you that if the Barbados Labour Party does not stand up for you now, tell me, why do we exist? What is the reason? And I say to those who are timid, if you don't stand up for your country, there will be nothing left to stand up for when you vote against them. Jamaica and Trinidad took almost 50 years. And even now, they are not the powerhouses that they were or were supposed to be. Philippines, Nicaragua had bad leadership, and decades later, they cannot get back on their feet. Bajans, what lies before us is fearsome. And I say to you that if I didn't speak out on Cahill and the Labour Party now, what would you have been subjected to? If we don't speak out on behalf of the workers now, when the customs officers fight for their rights to stay out of Bra, they would not know that one of the things they'll be fighting against is a government that will send them home at 60 years old. If we don't talk out, you would not know that the government owes your National Insurance Fund $220 million. And many of you can't get your pensions on time. Many of you can't get your sickness benefits paid. You have to join hands with us, because we have to defend all that is right about Barbados and Barbadiana. And I give you the solemn commitment tonight in the shadow of Providence Church that this Barbados Labour Party will not be deterred. You will have the chance to protect your Barbados, but we need your voices and we need your hands, and if necessary, your feet. And we will join. The next few days will be tense and difficult days. And I want people to keep their heads on. I want people to be of calm assurance. This is primarily an industrial matter. And I have said in all industrial matters, if the unions are doing their job, we will support them. If they're not, that is a different matter. But we recognize where we were born, and we were born amidst the workers. And what lies before us is a contemptuous, indifferent Prime Minister who up until 11 o'clock tonight, that will come in 3 minutes, has not told the people of Barbados, do not fear, do not worry, your government will deal with this. Your Barbados Labour Party led a government for 14 years, and there was no general strike in this country. We never carried you to the brink, because we understood that everything that happens on this island is the business of government. And we understand that our government should not act immorally in the first place. We did not leave decisions to the hands of a few. We did not give a few people the right to make money, to get all their contract money, and you cannot get a salary increase for almost 7 years in this country. So when I ask you to listen to your radios carefully this week, and as we go on, there are causes being fought in this country. We are not at the center of it, but we will not stand idly by and see people fight causes that we know to be noble causes on their own. And we will not be intimidated by anybody for associating ourselves with the rights of workers, particularly when those workers stand to face penury, stand to have their whole life broken down, stand to not be able to pay their mortgages and to pay their salary, to pay their car loans. We will not in this country stand idly by, because we shall fight for Barbadians. We shall not be deterred. And if you stand with us and recognize that this is not just about waiting to an election. Elections will come whenever they come. But right now, Barbados is at risk, and people are doing things in your name. And when the election comes, there may be nothing left. I ask you tonight to stand up for something, for if you do not, we will lose everything. Good night and God bless.